wai tohi Māori, tēnā tohi a mai ta tohu nei, ki ngā mana o te rangi, ki ngā tūmana whanau rao Ngāti Maniapoto me te korouna, tēnā, whakahia rānea hou, turuturu o viti whakamaua kia tīna. Tīna! Hau mea huia!
As we are all well aware, Te Ao Māori is facing yet another multi-pronged sustained attack from the government. We in Te Rohe Pootae are frankly not surprised, and that following the Crown's absolute apology to us in 2022, that the Crown is once again turning its back on a treaty partner a mere 2 years later. Examples of this are the Marine and Coastal Area Amendment Bill geared to extinguish our mana in the moana. And secondly, we have the principles of the treaty bill, which at its core desecrates te treaty. And these are just to name but a few. Before a new constitutional arrangement can be effectively debated and concluded in Aotearoa, it is our view that the terms of this debate have to change so that the constitution and indeed sovereignty are seen as things that can be debated. The need to change the terms of the debate and move beyond the couching of sovereignty being broadly posited as a social construct of absolute power, possessing an elementally unchallengeable facade backed by violent force. It's not only pressing but also existentially necessary from our Rohe Pootae tangata whenua point of view. We go back to the origins of the sovereign authority of Te Rohe Pootae. This begins with our first contact in Aotearoa, those of our tupuna tāpātai, arriving in Kāwhia long before the arrival of the European, some 61 generations ago. And following our permanent move here 30 generations ago, we were living here in organised societies, occupying the land and controlling the moana as our foremothers and forefathers had done so. As many generations before us have, our hapu were governed according to tikanga, system of law that strictly enforces the equilibrium between hapu and our taiao. With this, we have the power of tapu, tikanga, and utu. The power of our hereditary rangatira is evident, and their legitimacy could not be questioned or challenged save by those who were enemies. Importantly, chiefly power elicited obedience. This is entirely tika and therefore satisfied our Māori sense of legitimacy. The legitimacy in the sense of being tika is the same as or akin to, at least in our Māori context, existential completeness. It is this exercise of ultimate authority that is the perpetual and collective authority of hapu that was reaffirmed in the whakaputanga o te Rangatiratanga o New Tirene, and reaffirmed indeed exercised in te tiriti, in the gifting of kāwanatanga to the Crown. Our formal legitimisation of the collective political power and authority in Aotearoa in the sense of the Māori nation state has its origins in and was clearly tended and reified with the advent of e whakaputanga. The document was the basis of Indigenous sovereignty, and although this Māori sovereignty overall has been viewed by some as theoretically problematic, especially from an Anglo-historical position, and never mind them, a review of what constituted Māori sovereignty reveals that there's nothing difficult about conceptualising what it was, particularly among our tupuna anyways in the 1830s. And British recognition, therefore, of the Māori state was unproblematic, duly marked and thereby manifestly affirmed. It was in 1840 when classical European sovereignty, spoken about in our statement of position, clashed with Māori sovereignty, and this contention continues today. We had agents of the British Crown falsely modified information concerning what the treaty was about, knowingly and deliberately to achieve a false outcome, where if they were successful, rangatira, by their very participation in this process, would be unwittingly over time, bringing about our own sovereign demise. It had the fullness of the process of the theoretical taking of sovereignty by stealth means, or by attrition being explained to those that signed their treaty. No one would have signed it. In fact, Hobson, Simons, and Whiteley may have lost an organ or two in the process. Such would have been the offence within such a proposition that our rangatira would cede their mana to another sovereign who had not defeated us. And the follow-on from this is what leads us here today. Two distinct versions of reality. Where on one hand, the Crown says it has completed the process of assuming sovereignty here in Aotearoa, and it believes it is in fact acting as the mandated sovereign body, eventually under a constitution it conveniently drafted to legitimate itself. And on the other hand, Māori, who rightfully contend that cession never happened in 1840, and everything after that is a blatant abuse of the 1840 gift of kāwanatanga to the Crown. Therefore, we have the misbelief by the Crown of the cession of sovereignty in 1840. Therefore, the annexation of 1840, via its proclamation that followed, is also a misbelief, or at best an incomplete. The latest patent later on that year, officialising this colony, New Zealand Constitution Act, all part of the standard operating procedure of classical European sovereignty grab, effectively in accordance with its own system of outdated laws of that time, and in that the Crown's position was therefore unmistakably self-serving in manufacturing the grounds for claiming it had acquired sovereignty at some point in time, as it ground its way through a list of ways to self-legitimize, like a parasite slowly taking over its host. We say the constitution of nationhood did not begin in 1840, but formally began 5 years earlier, in 1835. You see, it's either the Crown has laws and we have laws too. Or if the Crown deconstructs us to have no legitimately recognisable laws prior to 1840, then there's no gifting of the kāwanatanga component of our collective sovereign to the Crown in 1840. So it's the fruit of this poison tree of what we call the Crown's assumption of full sovereignty that is in question here today. From then on in, the Crown never ever honoured any sovereign agreements, instead proceeding on the basis of its legal theory concerning its assumption of sovereignty, where it had imported a number of ancient and obsolete treaties, theories of sovereignty, theories from papal bulls, etc., to build the shaky grounds which its belief that it had attained sovereignty stands on. We say in Rohe Pootae, as all Māori say, Māori chiefly sovereignty is above and beyond kāwanatanga, and that in 1840 our ancestors did not cede sovereignty. We say that in 1863 our ancestors reasserted our sovereignty with the Aukati, declaring our Rohe to be off limits to the Crown and its allies. And again we reasserted our Tino Rangatiratanga in 1883 with the declaration of the Rohe Pootae outer boundary. Say in 1885 the rules of engagement for te Rohe Pootae were put in place by our rangatira, as one would expect when formally setting aside te Rohe Pootae as a sovereign area under Tino Rangatiratanga o ngā kaumātua kuia maha o te rohe, and setting up guidelines for the Crown to prevent the future return to armed hostilities. We say that te Ōhaki Tapu is our waypoint marker to inform us of the real state of affairs as to our 1840 sovereign position, and informs us today as to what our 2024 and onwards position is to be also. The construct behind te Ōhaki Tapu, which was never honoured by the Crown, still yet stands as a model to give the Crown another way to recouch within itself terms of the debate concerning sovereignty and having a genuine discussion, therefore, concerning constitutional reform. Without a way forward to be able to hold genuine talks, we will continue this duality until we again come into serious conflict. In regards to the moana, which is what our ropu is about and its associated hapu, for which our claim is centred on, and how te Ōhaki Tapu relates to the moana, the Rohe Pootae boundary laid down in 1883, official initiation of the Ōhaki Tapu negotiation extends 20 miles out into the sea. This ocean boundary is not a peripheral notion of some sort of parallel contemplation of our tupuna. There's no dividing line between whenua and moana in the collective mind of our tupuna. The fact that our tupuna asserted their boundaries 20 miles out to sea, as Taonui Hikaka did in the Native Land Court, 19th of March, 1888, is an absolute record of our Māori thinking around territory. And how we get from the gift of kāwanatanga, allowing the British Crown to be able to set up a governor's office from there to a constitutional monarchy today is in fact a long history of split realities existing at the same time. The fact that the Crown is now a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system of government are indicators of 184 years of Te Tiriti being in a state of permanent breach, and 184 years of split realities caused by the Crown ignoring Te Tiriti and reinforcing its version of reality consistently by the use of military force and by the tyranny of the majority, giving the Crown ultimate legislative white colonial power to establish a colonial state in New Zealand without any power sharing with Māori. These two versions of reality first came into conflict in the Tai Tokerau, 1840s, then the Kiingitanga, then Taranaki, 1860, Waikato Raukaua Hikairo and Maniapoto, 1863. We have the Ho-Ho Wars, Titoko Waru, then the Crown's assumption of sovereignty was challenged with the declaration of Te Rohe Pootae in 1883. We have Te Ōhaki Tapu, 1885. Coming forward, we have the invasion of Maniapoto, we have Te Puia, and the draft in the World Wars. Skip forward to 1975 nationwide land march. And then in 2004, the Crown moved to take ownership over part of our 20 miles of the moana, and indeed all 33 million or so acres of seabed around Aotearoa out to the 12 miles. 2007, we saw Rohe and others branded as terrorists, including Maniapoto such as myself, who came to Te Urawera to give support to our Rohe whānau for whom we have a sacred compact with, and that is to stand together in times of distress. 2024, the Crown is coming again into conflict, finding itself subject to the largest hikoi in the history of this country, where more than 84,000 Māori and allies marched on Whanganuiatara, and collectively well over 100,000 marched nationwide with banners presenting the real timeline, the real reality, that of our tika against that of the Crown's split reality. So we make two following recommendations to the tribunal regarding constitutional reform. And these would make the bare minimum constitutional reforms needed to begin to move the two split realities towards each other. They're possibly avoiding lengthy period and nationwide upheaval that is coming, or any future repeats of this. Our first recommendation is for the full entrenchment of Te Tiriti. Entrenchment of Te Tiriti in law, explicitly recognising Te Tiriti and Aotearoa New Zealand's constitution. Our second recommendation, which is that the Tino Rangatiratanga of the Rohe Pootae be enacted in legislation in a manner which recognises and affirms the autonomy of the Rohe Pootae state, our rights of autonomy and self-determination, in a manner imposing positive ongoing obligation on the Crown and all agencies acting under the Crown's statutory authority to give effect to those rights, and the full recognition of Te Ōhaki Tapu as a constitutional accord, and that the said binding legislation makes appropriate provisions for the practical exercise of Rangatiratanga by Te Rohe Pootae Hapu, and secondly, under the above Te Ōhaki Tapu, call that the 20 miles of our Rohe Moana be unencumbered from all territorial-based legislation and be set aside in the final Aotearoa Constitution, placed under the full unencumbered control of Te Rohe Pootae. Tēnā koutou.